And welcome back. Now, according to recently released statistics by the National Association of Automobile Manufacturers of South Africa, new vehicle sales in the country has dropped by 98.4% in April. And that, of course, comparing the figure to vehicle sales sold in the same period and the same month last year. And this has partly been attributed to the ongoing national lockdown, which has put in place a limit to spread, of course, the coronavirus in the country. The automotive industry is set to contribute 6.9% to GDP and accounts for 30.1% of the country's manufacturing output and vehicle components which are exported on the international market. And then we spoke to Leighton Baird earlier from the AA. So for further reaction to this and the overall impact on the industry, we are joined now via Skype by Executive Director and CEO of the National Association of the Automobile Manufacturers of South Africa, Mike Mabasa. Thanks so much for speaking to us. Welcome this morning, Mike.
Thank you very much, Sakina. Good to be with you.
So your reaction to government's decision to reopen the market for new and used vehicle sales?
Well, look, we're very excited about the fact that government has finally agreed to open up vehicle sales in the country, primarily because of the fact that it is important to make sure that when you open up manufacturing, because remember under level 4, government had already opened up manufacturing, but they only did so and left out vehicle sales at dealership level. And our view and the submissions we've made to the minister was that it is difficult to open up manufacturing because you will not be able to manufacture any car, because South Africans are buying cars purely based on bespoke requirements. They go into a dealership and they specify specifically what kind of a car they would want and so on. Only then we are able to manufacture a vehicle. So it's actually a value chain, and you cannot obviously separate one element of the value chain from the next. So we are very excited that the dealerships are now back online.
Mike, how has the industry overall, firstly, been affected since the start of the national lockdown? We've heard in other industries about retrenchments. So just give us a sense of how this industry has been impacted.
Well, look, the industry has been impacted quite significantly since the initial lockdown was instituted. As you correctly said during your introduction, in the month of April, we've seen a 98% drop in terms of vehicle sales compared to the corresponding period of last year. Primarily, and this is an indication, obviously, an indicator as well, that it has been very tough for many of our manufacturers and also our retail business. We are obviously concerned specifically because the automotive industry is a global business. We do a lot of business, not just in South Africa. We're currently exporting into around 151 different countries around the world. And because the coronavirus is a global pandemic, the impact is not just in South Africa, but certainly felt across the country. Last year in 2019, we exported almost around 64% of the vehicles that we produced in South Africa. And we will obviously be having a difficult time this year to be able to reach those levels this year, primarily because most of the exporting countries where we export to, obviously the demand will drop quite significantly, and which means 2020 is definitely going to be a difficult year.
And Mike, with regard to businesses in distress currently, do you have some sort of indication as to what percentage of businesses are really struggling? Are people talking about foreclosures at this point?
Well, at this point, we are very fortunate that in relation to the manufacturers, because remember the industry is classified under different categories. So we've got those who are manufacturing. We are hosting in South Africa 7 manufacturers of massive multinational brands in the country. And many of those 7 companies have indicated that job losses are currently not on their radar, and they are not anticipating any major job losses at this particular time. And I think the fact that we are back at work now obviously was a huge relief. The second segment, obviously, it's our importers, some of whom have also indicated that there will unfortunately be some level of retrenchment, albeit not as huge as we had initially anticipated. And the fact that they are also back at work as from yesterday, because most of those importers are actually running dealerships in the country, we are hoping that they can then be able to revise their numbers and help us to be able to save as many jobs as possible as we can. I think the segment that we are concerned about, Sakina, it's really around our components manufacturers and also the entire value chain, which is, your ordinary guy in the street who's fixing vehicles or small workshops that are employing people and so on. And I think that is where our concern is, and that's where many people might obviously be losing their jobs in that particular space. But hopefully, because the industry is back now online, we have obviously communicated in the last 12 hours to most of our members to also indicate to us if there are going to be any major indications around job losses. And we'll continue during the course of the month of May to monitor that particular situation very, very closely.
And just a final one, Mike, with regard to import and export, and you touched on the global nature of this particular pandemic. So with regard to other parts of the world being closed, you perhaps here in South Africa needing certain components, or other parts of the world needing components from you, how has that been playing out at the moment, and how are things going to be affected as a result of the lockdowns in various parts of the world?
Well, currently we are fairly comfortable that we've got the necessary components we require to enable us to continue to manufacture vehicles across the value chain. And also our component manufacturers are back at work. They are doing what they are doing best in terms of making sure that we are able to manufacture components in South Africa. You would recall, Sakina, that South Africa took a decision towards the end of 2018 to introduce the South African Automotive Master Plan. And that master plan, amongst other things, we want to be able to make sure that we're able to localize component manufacturing and deepen that localization as much as possible so that we can be able to be self-reliant in South Africa. Currently, 39% of the components we have in our vehicles that we produce in South Africa are produced here. We have increased that threshold from 39% to 60%, so that we can be able to make sure that more and more components are actually manufactured locally, so that we can be able to reduce our dependence on importation of components into the country. And obviously, hopefully, that will also help us to create more jobs for many of our people.
Well, Mike, thanks so much for speaking to us this morning. And that's the Executive Director and CEO of the National Association of the Automobile Manufacturers of South Africa, Mike Mabasa.